The workaholics of the world won't shut up about how good and noble and necessary overwork is, but that doesn't mean they're right. First of all, the cult members themselves aren't exactly the most reliable witnesses here, and maybe straight up lying or just fooling themselves. In a culture where long hours are venerated, there is huge pressure on them to inflate the amount of hours they say they work, either to stroke their own egos or to try to manipulate their employees to work more. And studies do actually show that people notoriously overestimate their own working hours. Also, they believe all those extra hours made them successful. That doesn't mean it's true. Look at it from their side. They've worked 80-hour weeks for decades and made huge sacrifices in other areas of their lives. Imagine what it would cost them psychologically to have to admit that, yeah, I could probably have achieved pretty much the same results working 40 hours a week and still had a life. All of that extra time I spent at work was just wasted. That would be a massive blow for them, especially since they've based so much of their identity and self-worth on their ability to work more than others. So it probably won't surprise you to hear that studies show that people who work long hours overestimate their own productivity and underestimate the negative health effects of overwork. They kind of have to, right? So no wonder these people can't break out of the cult. Well, actually some of them do. Though it's usually the ones that eventually have some sort of mental or physical breakdown. Lying in a hospital bed and looking at the sutures from a quadruple bypass, some of them do have an awakening about the real cost of all that time they spent at work. But, why wait until then? And beyond all that, we can't trust all of these stories of long hours leading to success because there is a massive reporting bias. Let's make a chart. You have people who work all those extra hours and people who don't. Then you have people who achieve success, however we define that, and people who don't. Man, I love a good 4-quadrant model. Traditional thinking has it that everyone is in one of these two squares. Down here, you have your regular humdrum worker bees working 40 hours a week who will of course never amount to much of anything and never be very successful. But up here, you have the stars of the modern workplace who are committed and put in the hours and who get all the rewards. Those other two squares, don't worry about it. There's no one there. Not a soul. Completely empty. This is such obvious nonsense that I shouldn't even have to address it. Story of my life. Let's do it anyway. In this box, we have all the people who worked super hard, but were somehow mysteriously not successful. Like the female executive, who put in longer hours than any of her male competitors, but was still passed over for a promotion because sexism is a thing. Or the hard-working management consultant who was perfectly on track to get that partnership and then died from a heart attack. Or the tech founder who worked night and day on the startup, but still never got funding for it. Or the super talented young game developer working 90 hours a week who was laid off when his workplace was bought by a much bigger competitor and they started downsizing. Do you know someone who worked really hard and did not get that payoff? This is them. Ignoring these people while yelling to the skies about all the successful workaholics is a textbook example of survivorship bias. That's the logical error of concentrating on the people that made it past some selection process and overlooking those that did not, typically because of their lack of visibility. There are about 1 million ways that working long hours will end up not paying off, but we don't like to think about that because we prefer to pretend that we're 100% in control of our careers. We ain't, and the huge number of people who end up in this square proves it. And then in this square up here, we have all the people who have become truly successful without working overtime. What's that? You've never heard of any? That's kind of curious, isn't it? It's almost as if their stories don't fit the preconceived narrative in business orthodoxy, and so those stories don't get told. But there are a ton of them. Let me give you three. Yvon Chouinard started Patagonia because he needed money to go rock climbing. In the beginning, he'd close shop whenever he had enough cash and open back up again when he ran out. This approach has stayed with him, and he usually leaves the office at 3 p.m. When he's even in the office, he spends much of the year in Wyoming, where he only calls into work maybe twice a week. Patagonia has many innovative ways to keep work hours in check, including my favorite, the surf rule. Their HQ is near a beach in California, and the rule is that whenever the waves are good, you can leave whatever you're doing at work and go surfing. They even have surfboards for you to use in the reception. Fred Gratson describes himself as the laziest man in North America, and yet he has started several successful companies, including an ice cream company and a telecommunications group. He wrote a book called The Lazy Way to Success, where he explains his belief that success is inversely proportional to hard work, and that if it feels like work, you're doing it wrong. Henrik Rosendal, CEO of the Danish design company Rosendal, deliberately keeps his work week at 40 hours and never leaves work later than 4:30, even if that means getting up and walking out in the middle of a meeting. He used to be the kind of boss who worked late into the night and responded to emails around the clock, but then he realized that if he couldn't do his work inside normal hours, it had to be because he wasn't good enough at delegating and prioritizing. This picture of Henrik with two of his kids and a bike trailer will probably be the most Danish thing you see this week. According to the cultists, these people should not exist because they debunk their myth. The cult promises two things. One, if you work hard, success will follow. And two, success will only come if you work long hours. As we have clearly seen, both of these promises are false. Now, does that mean there are no benefits to long hours? I found one study that showed that long hours can boost your career, but it ain't exactly magnificent. The results imply that when hours exceed 47, 5 extra hours per week are associated with 1% increase in annual wage growth. So if I'm reading that correctly, it means that going from 40 to 47 hours gets you nothing, while every 5 hours on top of that gets you 1% more than those working only 40 hours. And that, by the way, the study said that's mostly if you're young and highly educated. Color me unimpressed. So I'm not saying there are no advantages to buying into the cult of overwork. In certain workplaces and in certain industries, it may be the price of admission and the only way to get ahead. But I am saying that whatever benefits you might get from all that extra work, it will be limited and uncertain and come at a very high cost in all other areas of your life. And also, whatever raises and promotions you might get out of it are not because you're actually any better at your job or created more value for the organization. The research clearly shows that permanent overwork only makes you less productive. No, you only got those pats on the head over your rivals at work because you were the one most willing to buy into a bullshit belief system and the one who sacrificed the most of your private life to it. Kind of like how cult members are rewarded for having the strongest faith and for sacrificing the most to the cult. Some people think, I can do this for a few years while I'm still young and have no commitments, and then I can scale back the hours, and maybe you can. But you might also end up sick and burned out, or worse, you might end up buying into the system through a vicious cycle of abusive treatment and conspicuous consumption. And even if you manage to successfully game the system by faking an 80-hour work week like the consultants we heard about earlier, and getting all the rewards, you would still be perpetuating the system and working actively to keep it in place so it can hurt new people coming into your field. So there is zero doubt that all of this overwork sucks. It's hurting our work lives and our private lives, and it even lowers our work performance. Which raises the question, Why the hell do we still have it? Let's look at that. I gotta say, when I started writing this video, I honestly had no idea that it would end up being nearly 90 minutes. So instead of making it one long piece, I've split it into 7 shorter chunks. You can find the link to the other videos in the video description or right up here. I hope you find them entertaining and useful. If so, it would be awesome if you click like and subscribe. And if you have any questions or thoughts, please write a comment. I'd love to know what you think about the Cult of Overwork.